Good. So Mike Bocanegra, Mike Jacobson, and I sharing this story with you. Bocanegra is not able to be here. He's traveling right now today. We call it the Sabal Court story. It's the name of an apartment complex that we brought from beginning to end, from before beginning and past the end now. And we're going to share that story with you today. It's a full cycle of a deal. Sometimes we just hear about the upfront sides of those, from acquisition to funding to the actual execution of running the property. We're going to share that today. Let me just show a picture here. About 30 buildings on the property. Swimming pool. This is a Class C. 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments in a good mix in the Tallahassee area. On a zone of progress in Tallahassee. There's a brand new Class A apartment complex going in right next door right now, which actually adds value here. We closed on this, selling it a couple of weeks ago, and we'll talk about that. Getting into a multifamily deal is kind of like going through a maze. I think David would agree with this. Even those of you that have done single family like Masood realize it's a maze. You are looking, you find something, you got to see if it makes sense. You got to find financing for it. There's all kinds of paths on this maze to get there. And eventually, every once in a while, not every time, but every once in a while, you make it to your goal at the other end of the maze. And this is one that happened to us back in 2019 when Mike Bocanegra, who's up in Tallahassee and has several apartment complexes up there already. Mike Jacobson and I partnered with him. He identified this property through a broker. We were able to get it under contract, and it's a wonderful piece with that. I like to think about the image of a baseball game. We had gone through the whole process there, due diligence, gathering the money together, getting all the documents together, getting to closing with it. But that's kind of like when it finally closes, it's kind of like the national anthem's over on the baseball field, and it's the top of the first inning, and the score is 0-0 at that point. But we're on the field, Mike. We got the keys. What was that like?
Oh, yes, that was exciting. It's like, hey, you're going out in the field, ready to play. This is the real thing. And that's when the fun begins. You really start, you have the property now, and now it's time to get out and start increasing the value like we had planned in our business plan. So we gave ourselves high fives, like that's the honeymoon phase. When you first get into the property, it was a great feeling. This is a major accomplishment, 128 units. We achieved the goal. Pulled passive investors in. We had 3 general partners, and it was the beginning of a great partnership. And but the honeymoon didn't last very long.
So. Yeah, 2 weeks. I think the honeymoon lasted 2 weeks for us on this one. There are problems that hit. Owning a big apartment complex is not just an intellectual exercise, not just a theoretical thinking about it on paper. All of a sudden you own it, and things started happening there. The honeymoon was over, and there were specific things with the property and global things that happened to us, and we'll talk about both of those. Tell us about what happened 2 weeks in here, Mike.
Yes, we closed on November 6, 2019, and then 2 weeks later, property manager walked out. She was done. And so we had to find a new property manager, the leasing agent, the primary one in the office. And think about this at Thanksgiving time, going into the holidays. It's not really when people are looking for work. And we realized real fast, this is a business with personnel that we're going to have to be managed. And it turned out to be more busy or more involved with that than what we had expected. Then we had to find crews to do the turns. We had 1 turn crew to start with, but over time, even those have turnover. And sometimes you have to do you need multiple crews working together. And then you also have the maintenance and the leasing agent turnover. So, sometimes Well, we realized pretty quick then, we're asset managers. We did not intend to be on site all the time. We wanted somebody available to go there, but the property managers on site are really the people who see day in and day out. And finding that right staff could be a challenge, but it was extremely important to have the right people there.
Yeah, that really threw us in those that first month of operation there, holidays, beginning of a new year, all kinds of things there. That's one of the problems that we faced. Another problem we faced was 2020 March, COVID, and it hits us within our first months of owning this property. Significant, scared us. A lot of unknowns when COVID hit. We were concerned about the safety of our staff there in Tallahassee with the residents. We didn't know if we'd have to wipe every surface down with a disinfectant every day. It was a lot of unknowns with that. And in addition to that, people were losing their jobs and not paying the rent on time. And before we knew it, the government put in this moratorium for evictions, and some people took advantage of that. And there were some significant losses that we had financially because of COVID. So we had personnel issues, and then COVID hit. And what else are some of the problems we had, Mike?
Oh, we also discovered that, even during due diligence, we thought we did a really good job. We've all bought properties before, and Mike Bocanegra had bought several large multifamily properties in the past. So we walked every single unit before the purchase. And so we were looking at appliances. We were looking at the big items that would cost the most money to renovate and what would take time. But we also discovered after owning it a little bit, think about when you buy a house, you discover things after you move in that you did not discover when you were walking through before, the inspector didn't pick up on when doing that report. So there are just things that you discover. Some of them are nuances, some of them can turn into larger problems. One of them was felt like in some areas we had a poor quality of residents, that some of them got in the habit of not paying, or if they were paying, they were paying late. With the plumbing, sometimes the water bill would start spiking up. And it's like, what's going on? We have a water leak somewhere, trying to track that down. We find a wet spot in the grass, and next thing you know, we have the main water line to a building that is leaking. So you have 3 water meters on the property. Where's your leak? And that can be a challenge to find the source. And the air conditioners went out faster than what we thought they should have based on our previous inspection. So, even with all the due diligence that we did, there's still going to be some things that are going to keep cropping up. You're just not aware of them.
Yeah, so we had some staffing issues. We had this global issue of the crisis of COVID, and we realized we missed some things during our due diligence, which we did well, but maybe we'd turned into a little bit too motivated with that, Mike. And it moves along very quickly, and you're raising money and doing lots of things, and the time gets there and you close, and then we find out some things afterwards. But there was one other piece that hit us, and that is enough capital, enough reserves for operations, enough reserves for the capital improvements that were in our plan. We had several $100,000 available to us on day one for the capital improvements. And as COVID hit and some other things, we ran through our available capital fairly quickly. And that's a significant issue. Those of you that are looking at doing multifamily, make sure you have enough capital to keep you going when unknowns come and bite you with that. Mike, tell us how did we face these problems? What did we do when these problems showed up for us as the managers?
Well, the first thing, we recognized that we had enough to close. We were able to close on the buildings in the complex, but we also knew that our SEC attorney gave us a window for our raise. And so we met the minimum, but we needed to keep raising. So we kept seeking additional funds from investors. And later and I'm talking about investors who are not with us yet, and then also with our current investors, they were able to bring in additional funds. So another solution that happened midway in COVID was an economic impact disaster loan was made available from the Small Business Administration. So that was a significant influx, that we were able to bring in. We also had to learn how to manage the turns quickly. We needed to be able to. We had some of our maintenance guys were able to work on the turns, but we also ended up hiring another maintenance or a turn crew, and then sometimes we needed to go outside to an independent contractor to come in and do turns. That would be a heavier turn, but it would be quick, but it would also cost more money. So sometimes, depending on the volume of your vacancy, you might need to bring in more turn crews to get the units turned faster. And then that led to another problem. If you turn the crews too quickly, the leasing staff can't get the units filled fast enough. Just because they're available doesn't mean they can put somebody qualified in there. They have to sort through all the applicants and decide which ones will qualify. And then in the meantime, they're also advertising the property. So we found that one way to help alleviate them was going to apartments.com for our advertising. Well, that also turns out to be where one of the most common places people go when they look for a place to live. So if we're advertising on apartments.com, we already have a good market there where people are looking. And for the cost that we were spending on apartments.com, that helped alleviate the pressure from our on-site property management. And so one of the lessons out of that was everyone has their strengths. Sometimes you need to find the person who can do the best job and enjoys doing it. And in that case, it was apartments.com. That's what they were the experts at. You have your leasing agent is great at leasing. Your management staff has the things they're great at. And so you have to recognize what people are great at, what they can do efficiently, and where you need to go outside for another resource.
Yeah. So Mike, we drew on all resources, found some new ones to solve the problems that we were facing month after month, year after year of owning this property. Some of those we were able to solve ourselves. Some others, the global kind of market solved a couple of our problems. One of those was inflation. When inflation started hitting, it did a number of things. One of those was positive, and that is we were able to raise rents at the apartment complex. Raising rents means our bottom line goes up, the net operating income goes up, which increases the value of the property. And we began to see that a 5-year plan now, we had accomplished it within about 3 years, 3 years of owning it. We'd achieved our 5-year plan. We had a broker that told us the property might be worth umpteen $1 million at this point, and it got us really excited about that. But one of the problems we had was that we had gotten a prepayment penalty with our loan, and it was about $2 million of prepayment penalty if we paid it off at that point. And so that kind of slowed us down on seeking out a sale when the value was up and we're able to raise rents and get that net operating income up there. But the Fed did something that worked both for us and against us as inflation hit. Mike, tell us about that.
Yes, they did. In March of 2022, they started raising the interest rates. So the prime rate started going up. Over the next year, it went up by 3 points. So that has really made it harder for people to get a loan. You hear about it more in the home mortgage industry and how people can't afford houses now, but that also puts a downward pressure on prices. But the market had changed. Buyers became nervous. They were less optimistic. So all of a sudden, the activity in the commercial market started slowing down. Buyers were no longer buying on pro forma. That's where our $15-16 million valuations had previously come from, was because buyers were buying on pro forma, but now that stopped. So that was pushing our price down. But in the process, when the interest rate went up, that also helped push our uh, prepayment penalty down. So that it had an offsetting effect.
Yes, it did. And we just back and forth speaking with our silent passive investment partners, keeping them informed on this. We eventually made a decision. We're going to sell it. And we got in touch with brokers and signed a contract with Marcus and Millichap in North Florida. And they put it on the market and got it out to thousands of potential investors, and over a dozen, maybe 20 made offers on the property in January of this year. It was looking really good in there. But all the offers came back in too low. I mean, scary low. The kind of highest offer we had would mean all of our investors would have lost money on this property, and it frightened us a bit with that. So we kind of put selling it on hold and moved into making sure we're operating it well. And then Marcus and Millichap called in the spring and said, we've got a buyer that meets your price, a price that will work for you. And Mike Bocanegra, who is an excellent negotiator, was able to negotiate with through the broker to the prospective buyer, work out terms of a deal, and eventually shake hands on that deal and sign a contract. And we went under contract early this summer. And
then we were under contract, and then the buyers negotiated 2 extensions during the due diligence phase. We thought the due diligence was going to go quick. They had a significant amount of money in, and it was going to go hard at the end of the due diligence period. But then they needed a couple of extensions in there. So we're kind of on the fence at that point. Are they really going to close? You know, it's not over till it's over. And they did close a couple of weeks later, and that was July 26th. And then the wire came through. The proceeds net of the sale price less the loan. And once the wire came through, that's when we were able to look in the bank account and it felt real. So we did it. Even though the market was strong, it was a big shift emotionally. It was like a clutch hit in the bottom of the ninth, going into the contract, under contract, going through due diligence. You felt like, okay, it's like a tie game here. You got a man on base and you're just waiting for somebody to drive in that run. And they did it with a clutch hit in the bottom of the ninth. And it worked out. We won, our investors won, and our investors had a nice place to live while we managed the property.
yeah,
And it just felt real good pulling it full circle.
it really did feel good. And there was a significant shift there. I know David's been through that. Maybe all the rest of you have been through that, the cycle. And when it gets kind of rough, to be able to get back on dry land again there, or to score that run and win the game. We learned a lot of lessons. We shared some of those with you. Lessons about personnel, lessons about global issues, surprises, unknowns that are out there in the market, like COVID hitting us, or inflation, or interest rates rising. We also noticed some other things. Perhaps David's seen these, and that is to a lesson learned. We actually planned this from the beginning to be ready for those unknowns as best you can. So we had a 12-year loan, which gave us enough time if something happened that we would have time to adjust to it. There are a lot of operators out there right now that are in trouble. Their loans are coming due. The interest rates have gone up. Just the business plan doesn't work. They're in a lot of trouble. We were fortunate that we knew that ahead of time and were reminded of that. We also learned the importance of roles and responsibility, clarity among particularly the managing partners, if there's a partnership, and among the passive partners, that there's good communication and openness and transparency, and continuous awareness of what's going on, whether it's good or not good, that's just tremendously important. And the last piece here, I mean, there are a lot more, but one of those is we actually manage this property ourselves. We're asset managers, but Mike Bocanegra has a property management company himself. And all three of us, Mike particularly, said, we think third-party management is a good thing, at least for us, the way we operate it. Somebody that knows how to do it well. Wouldn't you agree, Mike, that third-party management ought to be really considered?
Yeah. Yes. And so, I mean, some of the reasons, think about when you go into an area, there are going to be certain property managers who are already doing well in that area. They know the city. They've been operating there for a while, and that's what they enjoy doing. That's what they do best. So why not use somebody that already enjoys doing this full time? And a lot of times they will also have the scalability. They have the economies of scale in there. So after that, let's see. Following the conclusion, we also recognized we needed to celebrate our win. Our investors made a good return. We made a profit after overcoming significant hurdles. A lot of those were external surprises, that we've talked about. And the general partners went to lunch, and when we met each other, it's like, oh, everybody's exchanging high fives. It was just a great feeling, having come full circle there. So, I thought it worked out well for everyone. And so, wrapping it up, I want to say thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation. I hope you got something out of it.